and why we are at the crossroads for the church's history. I'm going to go back and start in 1963, and when we come all the way up to today, the church's history is really divided in, financially at least, into two eras, before 2000 and after 2000. And it's a different environment in both of those times. There's nothing magic about that time. It's just what I picked because of the knowledge of going through all the numbers, where we stood in those years, and what happened during that time. Go back to March the 3rd of 1963. If you were standing in this position, you would be holding a shovel that moved the first dirt to build the church. The church was occupied in around 1965, and it was born in a little bit of a challenge, because when it moved from its previous position, it moved from a very large congregation that was an assumption it would be in this church, and it only moved about roughly half of those numbers. So right from the start, the church was a little smaller than it had planned. Now this is this is a very large building. It sits in a very unique place, and I'll talk about that in a minute, because where it sits has always been a risk to the church's future. From through the 90s, or through the 80s, or from the time it was born, through the 80s, creeping into the 90s, the church was doing okay. We had members, they gave to the church, but everything you see or that was added to the church was done by special donations, not from our budget. The windows, the dove window above me, that was donated in 1982. The windows along the side, they were donated by a family, a specific family, to give to the church. So most of the things in the church that moved it forward were donated by people, not from the church's budget, okay? Lots of things occurred in that time. We had a preschool that started in 1987. I'll talk about it in it a little bit later, but we had a preschool. We had a very large staff. The staff during the 80s was 2 pastors, a music director, an assistant music director who was also a bell choir director. We had a Sunday school superintendent. We had 2 paid teachers. So we had a large Sunday school, and we had a staff of 2 members in the administration office that were donating their time to run the church. So things were relatively smoothly as we went through the 80s. But as we went through the 80s, which all of you will remember, the culture of the country began to change somewhere in the mid-80s, slightly before that, where going to church started slipping away from the culture of our society. And that began to impact the finances of the church a little bit to start with, but over time it just kept accelerating. So as we approached into the 90s, our budget was basically paycheck to paycheck, okay? We earned what we got out of giving, and we met the expenses sometimes, but we still fell short in some times where we had to have special gifts or fundraisers or some way to get the money to continue through the year. By 1997, as I said, I'm hitting you with a big paintbrush. By 1997, our pastors of the 80s were gone. We lost our pastor, the last pastor through the 80s, in 1997. And in 1997, we had a new pastor come on board. It was a little bit different breed of cat. He had different ideas. We canceled the church council. We had something called a vestry, and it was a pretty large bureaucracy to run the church. And we started down a road with some expensive things that we did. We got into the end of the century, into the last years of that. This church was now approaching 35, 36 years of age. It needed some repairs, but there was no funds to do that. At the time, we had a group of men in the church who took it upon themselves to fund the foundation and fund a upgrade to our church. What you see from that upgrade is the lights. You see a lot of things in the church that you don't get to see, the air conditioning and a lot of things, and we borrowed. To do that, the church borrowed $1 million to do the upgrades to the church. It was to be funded by these three individuals and its foundation, which was headed by one of the top lawyers in the city of Phoenix. He was a highly respected, highly connected individual who led the foundation, and it was his point and the foundation and the three members that joined the foundation and actually were the foundation to begin to fund that $1 million mortgage. They reduced it to 500, and then we had a tragedy. The lawyer was killed in a car wreck, and the three members that were members of the foundation passed away. And when they passed away, their heirs did not honor their commitment to the church. So overnight, our budget increased by $5,000 a month, $60,000 a year, and that was not fundable by the budget. So slowly but surely, we did everything we could. Payment to our vendors slipped to 180 days. We did not pay them. We paid them on priorities. Tom Mueller, who was our church administrator at the time, his key role was to work with vendors as to when they would get paid. So we go through the early 90s. We reach through 2007, and by 2007, we had exhausted the reserves of the church. And so the planning began by the vestry to begin to close the church, okay? We had made plans to start into how do we close this kind of a church, this kind of a facility. Then, I don't guess you could call it a miracle, but it certainly something happened that made us be able to move forward. We had two members attend a meeting with the Synod, and in that Synod was introduced what was called the Transformational Pastor Program. The Lutheran Church at that time is if you've been in it a long time, you can realize that the Lutheran Church at that time was beginning to shrink, okay? Many churches were reaching the point that they were struggling to be able to go forward. The big church decided that they would come up with a transformational program that trained pastors to how to run a church alone. Long story short, the pastor that was talking at the time impressed these individuals, and it was a push to be able to hire that person, which they did. And the person was called a transformational pastor. What does that mean? The council was canceled, all support was canceled, and the pastor had almost dictatorial powers to run the church and try to recover it, okay? That pastor was given two tasks, okay? One of those tasks was to build this church to 350 members, and if you couldn't build it to 350 members and do it with 2 services every Sunday, then close the church. So the transformational pastor had a major task for those 2 tasks. Now, in a minute, I'll tell you something else that he wrestled with, but his task was to turn the church around. He was a great pastor. He was a great teacher. He was a great preacher, and he did a great deal to begin to move the church forward. He was hired in 2008, and it took 2 years before we saw the membership starting to move, and that we saw the income of the church start reaching being able to pay expenses without tapping into reserves. In addition, after that time frame, while he's the pastor, we had what can really be said a miracle occur. We were struggling. We still were working to pay bills every month, but we had an issue happen at the local Presbyterian church that broke loose, 63 members from that church, as our records show anyway, that moved over to Ascension Lutheran Church. And when you bring 63 members from a major church in the valley, here, our budget was not a curve, it was a step function. And suddenly, we're very, very liquid. It was a great time. We were able to do some things, to do some deferred maintenance, to bring the church up to as much as we could with what we could with our every year budget. And it worked well. But the big church, the Lutheran Church Chicago, where the headquarters of the church, they brought a series of personnel here on a tour through the country. Same problem as before, where the church recognized that it cannot survive going forward. So what it did was it put out a group of pastors traveling through the country, talking to pastors that had churches just like this, churches that they felt could never be supported in the future, and they asked Ryan to consider closing it, okay? So now Ryan had those two tasks. He was to build it to 350, and the big church was saying, hey, you can't live in this church very long because our forecasts show that we cannot support these kind of churches in the future, because as you look around, you realize why. Age, okay? The actuarial curves, and I'll get to this in a minute, but the actuarial curves were showing them that we're at the point in time where we're reaching the cusp of the curve in age where we'll start accelerating the loss of individuals. And when you accelerate the loss of individuals and the kind of individuals they are, you begin to lose the ability to support your churches. So two things. So the pastor at the time put together the same thing that we're talking about now, a program to close, to leave this church and go to another place of worship. That was put forth to the congregation. It was turned down, and so now in 2017, our pastor left the church because he felt he would never be able to meet those two requirements, and so he walked away. So now we're reaching to 2017. And in 2017, when you look at the financials of the church, you see it begin to click down with no ability to stop it. Every year, we were running about $35,000 to $40,000 in the red, and we were using up our reserves every year. By 2019, again, the council was looking at running out of money and having to face the fact that we're going to have to figure out what the alternate place of worship will be if nothing changes. So what changed? COVID. We hit 2020, and suddenly the government is willing to give us money, which they did. They gave us $40,000. That $40,000 moved us through the 2020 time frame because we had enough money to get to the end of the year. But when we got to the end of the year, we were going to face the same problem going forward. So what was the fix there? Sell 1 acre of the property of the church. Okay, and that's what we did. But it took forever. We started in 2019. We didn't get it sold in 2021. And we picked up short of $1 million for that. And that gave us the ability to get to where we are today. We recapitalized the finances of the church. We brought the reserves up to $200,000. And that allowed us to relax a little bit, knowing that we had time to plan because we knew there was nothing to backstop that $200,000. So over time, that $200,000 would slowly disappear. And it's slowly disappearing. and it will disappear in another couple of years with nothing changing. The church runs up against the ability to continue to fund itself. So that's why this team met. That's why we've been talking about this for years and years and years. How do we go forward? Because this is such a great congregation. It does such great things. It has such great people in it that we want that to go forward. But the big task that we have now that the team has been looking at is where to from here. So that gets us through a lot of years, and it gets us up to today. Excuse me. I'm going to lose my voice here in a minute. And so that's where we are. Now, that was a quick, that took me, I don't know how many minutes, but I went through, bless your heart. We went through from 1963 to today in a few minutes, and each one of those years you could spend almost the rest of the day just talking about where we are and why we got to where we are and the specific things. But one of the big issues now wrestling with us is not only does our budget and our reserves slowly being consumed, but we have some risk in this church that could accelerate the utilization of that budget and those reserves very, very rapidly if it occurred. First off, we're sitting in a 60-year-old building. If any of you have 60-year-old homes, you know what it's like to have a 60-year-old building. And so we've looked at, in considerable detail, what are the risks that would cause us to have to burn or use up some our reserves to go forward. And this was put forth to the council, to the membership of this team as to what those might be. And let me go through some of them for you. One, plumbing. All of you remember the porta potties out front. That was caused by the sewer failure. The sewer failure occurred because of pump failure. Pump failure occurred because nobody had taken care of it during those 63 years. And so once we figured out what was wrong with it, we've got it running, but we have no idea if it'll run all day tomorrow or from now till whatever happens. But plumbing is an issue. The Dove window, all right? Remember the Dove window, 1982? Take a look at the beak of the Dove window. All right, now drive down to the bottom in the red area, following that structure. You see the red and yellow area and all those little white areas? You see that crack? Okay, the way a Dove window is built, that's a very special type glass. That's not a stained glass window. That's what's called, excuse me, a dalle de verre glass. Dalle de verre is a French word for slab of glass. Each one of the pieces of glass in there are about 2 inches thick, and they're put together in a matrix of concrete and resin. And we had to repair it in 2012 because it was getting ready to sag into failure. It was pushed back up, reinforced, and under that window is a very, very strong chicken wire mesh. So if a piece breaks off, it will break off and be caught by that net. But if it does break off, it's going to be an ugly window for a long time because it takes a great deal of funds to get back up there and repair it. The actuarial effect, I talked a minute about that before. We are at the curve in the church where we have enough members to count that are over 90. That actuarial curve is slowly impacting the church. When you lose your senior people, you lose the pieces of our financing. And we have lost now, I think we're up to 6 in a very recent time frame. We will see that impact as we go down the road. Storm damage. This church is susceptible to monsoon problems. The way this building is built, it's a typical Taliesin design building. Beautiful architecture, terrible structure design. And what's on this building is a clad. roughness, the rock-looking facade on the building, that's put on over concrete. And what happens is, over time, that starts slipping away from the concrete. We've got several slabs right now that are starting to break loose from the concrete. Monsoon winds and monsoon rains have a habit of getting into any crack, and when they do, they'll pop it off the side of the building. When my wife and I joined this church, and I can't remember what year it was, half the church's exterior was gone. And it took us quite a while before we could ever come up with the funds to replace it. But that's a risk, and it will tear off that if we get a major, major windstorm. In addition, a major windstorm, what's above us here? Big steeple. And that big steeple is right above the dove window. And that big steeple is sitting there moving, and it's twisting. Okay, and it's slowly putting torque on the window. And when it does that, we come in and pick up a little glass here and a little glass there. And so slowly but surely, that's a deteriorating a point to both that area and the sides of the building. Okay, the parking lot, we have to repair the parking lot next year by contract. The air conditioning system, we've lost a compressor, we've lost another part of the air conditioning. In the last immediate future, those are $20,000 bills to fix. So if we have another one fail, there's another hit to us. We have the roof. The roof is a polyester foam covered by an elastomeric coating. It's good for 10 years. It's approaching 10 years. When it approaches 10 years, the coating begins to deteriorate and you expose the foam. When you expose the foam, that'll slowly deteriorate. We've had a roofer out recently to look at our patio out here. They found one area over here that's beginning to deteriorate from water damage, and we don't yet know what the highest roof, because nobody can get up there without a great deal of effort. So we've got that issue to look at in the future. And then, with our reserves, if you go down the road and you have to have any kind of decision with the church, you got to make sure you got the reserves in hand to do that. So we have to take a part of our reserves now and reserve them for future use, depending on which way we make a decision to go with the church. Okay? The other day we had a contractor come through on a visit. That gentleman had been here in 1964 when this church was born, so he had all the background and how it was built, all the equipment that went in it, and he knew to ask the right kinds of questions. And he was a major electrical contractor servicing very, very large buildings. So he was very, very structurally knowledgeable. And he looked at the church and he said, Mac, from where I look now and looking back and see what I see, I'm not sure $1 million would help you with this church right now, because it's got some pretty serious deterioration over time, okay? So we'd still have an old building even if we could raise it and even if we spin it. And so that's where we have wound up today. We are slowly exhausting our reserves. We don't know how long they will last, depending on what our consumption rate is. We don't know what this year will look like, but we will possibly have some deterioration of our reserves. It looks like we've got 2 to 3 more years that we could use our current reserves before we're down to zero. We don't want to go down to zero. So think about that. As you go to the next meeting and as you hear more about what we're doing, I'm going to turn it back to Jim and let him tell you what next steps are and where to from here. So again, I'm here till the sun goes down if you want to talk about details of all the pieces and parts here, because there's a lot of details to the things that I've brushed over to let you know where we are with the facility itself. And Jim, where are you?
I'm right behind you.
Go for it. Covered in my 6. Yeah.
Coming on? There we go. Before I go into, Mac, you took all my thunder. You took all my literature. Without it, I have nothing to say, and you'll all be glad. I just wanted to give you a little breakdown that I don't know if you have seen this. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. I don't know if you have seen this. We've had it around for some time. It's our giving units. We have, and when you see this or hear this, you might be as shocked as I was the first time I saw this. We have 79 units. That's 79 families. When I say units, it's families that give. And of that 79, out of our, I think we have 160, so almost half. So of that 79, the giving is less than $500 a year. So divide that by 52 and it gives you some idea where we're at on that. That's 79 give less than $500 a year. So when you think, why don't we have any money? You know, we have people. Why don't we have money? This will give you an idea. 16 giving units give less than $1,000 a year. 30 give up to $3,000 a year. 22 give up to $6,000 a year. 13 give up to $10,000 a year. Six give up to $18,000, and 1 gives $50,000 a year. So when you realize half is less than $500 a year, you can understand why we're afraid and why we are where we are. And I'm not trying to lay fault or blame or shame or anything. I'm sure you all give what you can give, and I don't want you to take that away from you. I just want you to realize what we're dealing with when people say, how come we don't have any money? How come we don't have any money? You know, we all know what we give, and you wonder why there's no money, so maybe that will help you a little bit. It sure opened my eyes very, very, very wide. So I'm going to give you the summary. Okay. Of what we came to with this group. And again, I can't tell you how difficult this was to come up with this. So we have some options. Option 1 is saving the church with the building. Now, number 1, I want to make it very clear. The church, when I say the church, I don't mean this building. I mean all of you. You are the church. We are the church. This is only a building. Only a building. So that's a hard thing to wrap your mind around sometimes because you say the church, the church. We are the church. And it could not be a better church. I want to start with that. There is so much love in this church and so much kindness done and so much outreach that is done through this church. It's amazing. It truly is amazing. And so when I say the church, it's you. It is not this building. And it's been a hard thing to recognize for me because I fought for this building a long time ago when the decision was the building needed to go. And I said, no way can this building go. No way. And a lot of you were here at that very time. And you know that pain when someone's saying, it's almost like you're being evicted from your home. You're going to do everything you can to keep that. So the saving of the church with the building. Selling the building with a leaseback agreement. These are just options that were thrown out. So, and I want you to be aware of the options that we were dealing with. Sell or rent the building with stipulations, like a joint venture with another church. Merge with another church, absorbing them into our congregation, or we're absorbed into their congregation. Increase attendance and membership. Doesn't that sound easy? Not. You know, it truly isn't. We keep saying, everyone bring someone to church, bring someone to church. I know in my neighborhood, and we have 232 homes, and 6 of us on one street go to this church. And I think out of the other 232 homes, I don't think they go to church, in all honesty. There are a few diehard Catholics that go, but out of 232 homes, I really know about 10 families that attend worship. And I'm not sitting in judgment or anything. I'm only giving you the reality. When we say bring someone to church, we have no one else to bring to church. We've brought them all that we can bring. Find a wealthy benefactor interested in saving the building. Doesn't that sound easy? Sell bonds backed by property value. Rent space to another church. If some of you were here at a time that we did that, we had what were they? They were a Korean church, and they worshiped with us for a while. But anybody coming to church thinks, what? I shouldn't have to pay anything. Because when you think church, you think you should have everything for nothing. You're going to have a concert here? Oh, that should be free. It's church. Well, church has expenses. So, and people just don't quite put their minds around that. Hire staff to lead a revival of the youth program. If you've been here a while, you know how the youth program has worked. Like I say to Mark, he's 63. I said, you're among the youth. Now he's going to be mad I told you his age. But anyway, when I tell him he's one of the younger ones, and he truly is, it's kind of scary. Develop a mass marketing program to attract visitors. Launch a Save the Building major fundraiser. Now, council pretty much said they'd give us till Labor Day to come up with, I'm not quite sure on this figure. $1 million was thrown out, and then we realized $1 million was lunch money. So I think it went to $2 million. But we have to Labor Day. So if any of you have a couple million you've been wondering what to do with, you can save us by doing that. But even if we had $2 million, it's saving the building. It's not saving us. It's saving the building. Who are the people we are hoping to attract? Is the building underutilized? We know it's underutilized, but we don't know an answer to that. Is the building a historical site? Well, in some people's mind it is, and some of the neighbors would like to see it torn down and 5 wonderful $10 million homes built here. Can we leverage community concerts? We've tried doing concerts, and whereas I don't know if that's going to give us a couple million a year. Can we become a wedding venue for destination weddings? Well, most weddings anymore are not held in church. I mean, they're held in a wedding venue. They got the Ritz coming across the street. We thought that was going to do a whole lot for us, and I don't think it hasn't done a thing for us so far. Our ELCA preservation federal grants available? We had someone said, let's just get a grant writer, hire a grant writer, and just write grants. Is a preschool viable? Well, if you've been here a while, you know how the preschool went. And again, we're going downstairs with the little ones, the liability of it. We don't have the space. We're just not laid out to do that properly. If we raise the amount necessary for repairs, are we left with a building we still can't afford? That's a good question. If somebody gives us $2 million tomorrow and we fix all these things, can we still afford the building? Are we still going to get more people coming? So anyway, I'm going to go on and read the rest of these, and then we'll be open for questions, and you can fire away at us. Option 2 is saving the church without the building. That means we all stay together, which to this group that has done all this meeting, that is the most important thing, that we stay together. That's more important than this building. It's more important than anything. And everyone on this committee has felt 100% strong on this. It'd be a shame if we don't stay together. That's the biggest message I can send to you, that this group, and I know we're missing some folks, we need to stay together. Sell the building and merge with another church within a 10-mile radius. And if you know anything about this area, you know the churches that are available to us in a 10-mile radius. And we feel we can't go beyond 10 miles because, well, it just isn't going to work. I mean, people will go somewhere else. You got to drive 20 miles to church. It's just not going to happen. And when you look at our choices within the 10-mile radius, if you know anything about the neighborhood, we have St. Barney's down the street. I don't think they're going to have their arms wide open for us. We have a Presbyterian church not far away, and some of us know how that worked. And I can name about 60 people that would not be heading that way. We have a little Lutheran church off of Camelback in about 82nd Street, a little Lutheran church there. It's small. We have Prince of Peace, which is at 56th and Indian School. Prince of Peace is good. I know where I'm coming from because I went there for 20 years. It's a good-sized church. What keeps them going is their preschool. Their preschool, it's no secret, their preschool gives them over $307,000 a year into their coffer. They have less attendance than we do. I have good information from that church. Last week they had 100 in worship and we had 130. So I'll give you some idea of what that's about. Would the building attract another church looking to grow? Do we know of another church that would like to join us that we stay here? What is the current market value of the property? It is no surprise that we're sitting on a lot of money. No surprise. And any of you that live in Paradise Valley or know anything about real estate, when we sold that acre, which was a nightmare, but it finally happened, we got $1 million. The gentleman who bought it and contacted us almost weekly to tell me about how the beautiful home he was going to build, he sold it 2 weeks later for $1,300,000. And that man, who couldn't wait to build something on it, sold it again for $1,600,000. So that's what happened. We were thrilled because we were offered $800,000. We couldn't get above $800,000. So finally, when we got $1 million, we thought it's not going to get better than this. Then the market changed, and we had done all the work of dealing with the town of Paradise Valley, which we probably shouldn't have done. We probably should have said, whoever wants it, you can deal with the town. Because trust me, I would never deal with the town of Paradise Valley again. So we're sitting on 5 acres that if I were to guess today, would probably get the best part of $2 million an acre. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's just not going to happen right. Number one, we're not going to be ready to go anywhere overnight. And we have the funds to stay. We're not crying chicken little here like the sky is falling and we got to go tomorrow, because we don't want us to get to that point. We don't want to, if we don't go tomorrow, we can't pay the bills. We don't want to get to that position. So when I'm talking about this, don't think this is going to happen tomorrow, because it is not going to happen tomorrow. And as one of our elderly members on the board said, well, just keep it going until I die. So I don't know what that date is, but we just know it is not going to happen overnight. So don't think when we're talking about this in the option that we will be gone next week, because we will not be. So, and please don't give up giving because you think we're going somewhere, because that's been my biggest fear, that the giving will just stop, and then we're really in a big trouble. Sell the property and find a vacant church to rent or purchase. Well, we looked at a couple. Well, one, I shouldn't say a couple. And we really are spoiled being in the sanctuary. I mean, I can't see us. Someone said, get a storefront. Well, that sounds easy, doesn't it? Just get a storefront and we'll worship next to Kmart, or I guess they're not around, Walmart. It's just not that easy. And someone said, well, we'll just go to a hotel. We'll tell a hotel. Well, I was in the hotel business for 35 years. Hotels really don't like church people to be there every Sunday, because you just don't give a lot of money. And you don't drink, well, during church you don't anyway. But they don't want you there. That's not what that's about. What happens to the proceeds from a sale? Well, we have a member that had been with the synod for a long time, so we have good information where the money would go if we had a sale. If we have a sale and we go to another Lutheran church, the money goes with us. We have the money. We would be the pretty girl coming to the dance with $10, $12 million in our pocket. I think people might want us. I'm just guessing. What is the synod policy on merging? I really can't honestly answer that in good faith, because I don't know what their policy is. Someone here could speak more to that, but the Synod does not want to see us just close up and go away. I mean, but the Synod really doesn't, and you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, the Synod really doesn't stick their nose into that kind of business. They don't want to be in the business of telling churches where to go and what to do. So that, and if we have a question on that, you maybe can answer that for us. And what's the Synod policy on selling? I think the bishop probably is aware of what's happening, because nothing stays sacred. I was in a gathering and the bishop was there, and she sought me out immediately to say, we need to have lunch. Now, the bishop and I are not tight. She just wasn't looking for me so we could have lunch together. So I think the Synod is aware, and Pastor could answer that better than I can. But I think the Synod knows the problems we're having, and I think they are very supportive of us. We've been good Synod members. Our aging building needs really like $2 million. That's the top and bottom of it. The church has been in a deficit for a long, long time, and any of you who've been here a long time know that. And we're impacted by the social environment of constantly declining church attendance. I mean, we're not unique. We're not unique. My family's all from the Midwest, and you know the Midwest, you go to church. Well, they used to go to church. They don't go to church. I mean, my own family, the young ones, they don't go to church. Sad, they don't. They make sure the baby's baptized. They make sure you go to confirmation, and that's it. I mean, and it's not that I'm from a bunch of heathens. It's just that, and your own families, you can question your family. Your kids go to church? Your grandkids go to church regularly? I'm guessing not. Mary's giving me a cutoff here, so I think I'm done. She's pulling in the rope on me. So I now open it up to questions, and if you got a certain person on here you would like to answer, address it. So, and we do. This is the time. This is the time to get your answer. Not call your friend tomorrow and say, what do you think of that mess, or what do you think of it? This has not been done with a light heart, so we welcome any questions. All right, stand up. Come up here.
Let's have it on a mic.
We'll give you a mic.
So that
there we go.
the recording can hear.
Hi, I'm Linda Harnish. I am here half of the year, and the other half of the year I live in the Midwest in Grand Rapids, Michigan. In that city, we have a lot of historical buildings, and we have a historical preservation society. And I'm wondering, is there anyone in our beloved congregation that knows of something like this in the city of Scottsdale or the city of Phoenix? In Grand Rapids, when you've got a historical building and you register it, there are funds available to help you keep that building in good repair. And before that question is answered, thank you all of you who have looked into this. I've been a member here for a couple years, and I love this congregation. I felt so welcome. So that is my thought. Could we somehow find out, is there some kind of a preservation society that would help us with the expenses? And maybe we could take things one by one. You know, for instance, start with the Dove window up here, and if we could raise half of the money, maybe the Historical Preservation Committee would help us with that expense.
Thank you. Anybody on the team want to address that?
I can tell you that when our committee met, myself and an elderly lady were the most ardent supporters of keeping this building, okay? We have a lot of memories, fond memories of worshiping here, and and my whole background is marketing and sales. Sometimes we think we can do anything, accomplish anything, bring people in, and we talk so much about what we could do. But I will tell you this, I had a complete turnaround in my thinking, thanks to the man you heard from originally, Mac Bolton, Jeff, Ann Mutzfeld, and David Alsaki did a 3-page in-depth look. And he said to you, if you have any questions, come see me. I will tell you this, it's my opinion, give me $2 million to spend, it would be folly, sheer folly. One of the reasons is, do you think we can double or triple the congregation here? Ain't gonna happen, folks. It just ain't gonna happen, no matter what we do, because of the kind of thing that we heard from Jim about. So we do have good options. So I'll tell you what turns me on right now is what Jim spoke about, what a great group of people we have here, a loving, great group of people. Imagine what this loving, great people can do with $10 million merging with another congregation. The kind of outreach we could do, that really turns me. We can do things we can't even believe with that kind of resource. So that's my story. That's my turnaround from fighting like the devil to keep this building.
And
to
he
say,
did.
it's folly. All right.
Thank you. We never thought this man would turn. That is the truth. And I applaud him when he realized, and the other elderly person who did a turn also. Please stand. Yes.
Okay, we love this church and we love the architecture and all the history, but it seems pretty clear to me that that's not something that we can continue to support. I wanted to tell you that when we first came to Phoenix, we were originally members of Prince of Peace, and we loved the church, and we still have connections with that church. Jim, we knew you at
Then,
Prince of Peace.
yes.
We knew Karen at Prince of Peace. Merging with Prince of Peace, I think would be a great solution for us. I think we could keep together as a family that we just love from this church. And anyway, so I just wanted to speak as a member at one time of Prince of Peace, and the program there, the preschool, the church itself, and the grounds are lovely, and it might be a great solution. So anyway, I just wanted, if someone was wondering about Prince of Peace, maybe our voice would be heard there.
Thank you. We haven't officially courted Prince of Peace, and they haven't courted us. And someone went there last week and said that we're thinking of coming there. They were a little surprised to think we were coming there, because our pastors have spoken, our consuls have not spoken. So the consuls have not gotten together. Pastor, I can share this, met again this week with their pastor. I think they're more than welcome us, but we don't know that. So don't everyone go out of here and say, tell your Prince of Peace friends we're coming next week, because we've not been officially asked, or have we officially asked? So, yes, Susan.
So at Prince of Peace, I think there are a lot of children in that area, that Arcadia area. So when I did some research with Mac years ago about preschool, we learned that it really wasn't drawing people into the church. That's why we gave up on the preschool idea. But with Prince of Peace, do they have children going to Sunday school and things? So maybe that church is more viable with a bigger kind of community, with a confirmation class, with a teenage program or something? Or are those out not viable now?
I can't really answer that. I know when we went there, the preschool, when someone has a baby and lives in that area, they register the child the day the child's born to get into that preschool. There's no secret to that. It's very difficult to get in that preschool. But that doesn't have them go to church. I mean, it just doesn't work. We had the same at Valley Presbyterian. That's a very busy preschool and everything, but it didn't mean they were coming to church. I mean, their attendance is down. I mean, it is down, and the preschool keeps them going. So I would hope that we would have more there.
I think, Bill, you visited Prince of Peace, and didn't you say there were 12 children there last Sunday?
And they don't have a choir. And look at our choir. I mean, they don't have a choir. And we have half the congregation in the choir. So, I mean, it amazes me. It amazes me. Yes.
Yeah, I think we don't want to get into the weeds. These are all really good thoughts. You're right about the preschool not translating into membership. However, it brings in a massive amount of money that keeps their church afloat. So there's an opportunity for us to build that up. It also sits in Arcadia, and they're very active on their website, attracting youth theater to use their facility, things like that. This was a very difficult decision, believe me. No one's worked any harder than a large group of you to get the gardens going, to get this place going. But it became very obvious, and especially if you've ever been doing any event down in our kitchen, the kitchen floods on a regular basis because of the grease trap. I mean, it's just, there is no way we can stay here. And where I really came down was, and I'll just tell you a quick story. My grandparents built a beautiful home in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, where I grew up. And when they and I spent years there. I adored my grandparents. They had a lot of woods. I played in those woods. I had great memories. When they passed away, we moved into the house. More fabulous memories. All of the floats were done at our house. It was just an incredible place, and it was really in my head. Early marriage, after Pat and I are married, my parents called one time and they said, we're selling the house. We're moving downtown to a high-rise. And I was just struck dumb. I thought, my God, oh my God. And I got off the phone and I was so upset, maybe for 24 hours. And then I realized the first time I go back, my parents will still be there. My family is still there. That's what made that house so special. I adored my grandparents. She read to me. I adored my parents. I had a great high school. All my friends loved the house. They were all still there. We are the church. We are the fellowship. We are a family. And I think we need to really keep that in mind as we move along. But this church, God love it, to your history thing, it is a Frank Lloyd Wright design. Frank Lloyd Wright did not build this church. Their foundation is not interested in helping us with money. So if that helps you a little bit, but that's just a few things. Anyway.
Okay. While I got this here, April 16th, which that's the Sunday after Easter, we're going to do a vote. It's very, very, very important you are here. Well, the vote is, if you haven't figured it out, what we're pretty much saying here, we pretty much cannot stay here. And we need to proceed for the other options, whatever the options are. But the vote primarily is to say we know we cannot keep this building. We don't know what that's going to look like or anything, but April 16th, so please, 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 take Nancy and then I'll take Ruth. Nancy? The columbarium. The columbarium will go with us, wherever that is. And we've kept that in mind, and because we went and looked at a spot, another church that was for sale, and we realized we couldn't do that. We realized we wouldn't have the columbarium. Yes, Ruth.
What happens if we merge with another church? What happens to our staff? I mean, do we support two pastors?
Yeah, that's negotiable. We know this whole group, one thing we made perfectly clear from the beginning, we want to keep our pastor. We want to keep our pastor. That was not even a discussion like should we keep the pastor, or the pastor will have to look for a job and we'll give him a good notice and a good recommendation. That's never been in the conversation. The pastor's going with us whether he wants to or not. and Mary's going with us whether she wants to or not. I mean, wherever we go, we're not going to be the poor cousin coming in with no money. I mean, we're going to be able to have a little bit of weight and say we want this, we want that. We're not going there. I mean, we're going to go and be somebody's sugar dad and that's it. We're not doing that. We want us, and that's very important. Somebody else? Yes.
Hello, I'm Richard Sutton, and my wife and I are winter visitors and are members of the church. Are you going to send a paper ballot to us so we can vote?
We're trying to figure that out through what the legality of on the synod. Would you know what that is? Could you address that? Because we want everyone's input. It's not like it's just the people that are here all year long. We want everyone's input.
I'm Terry Train. I worked for our Grand Canyon Synod from 2007 to 2019 under Bishop Steve Talmadge. And so my involvement and knowledge comes from watching other churches go through this. I worked as the assistant to the bishop, both as a legislative liaison and a lobbyist, and also for candidacy for those that wanted to become pastors. What I've observed through that involvement are several things. We would, if we were going to do a merge, a change, whatever all of this is, first thing we'd ask is there an attorney donating their services to the synod who in turn would advise us? And during the 12 years that I worked, there was an attorney that donated pro bono services to help any congregation in any dynamic that they were underway. So that would be one thing. Then we would also talk about if we were coming in as a partner and we would be a well-endorsed partner financially, is we would talk about a memorandum of agreement and a legal agreement as to everything from who controls the resources that we have as a congregation if we're going to merge. We would also talk about staffing, everything if a congregation has a full-time pastor or a part-time pastor, to staff in the office, to support staff that are maintaining the building location, to choir, organist, etc. So a lot of this is good old-fashioned, interest-based problem solving, where we come in and we say we want to be the best we can be. If we're interested in joining a congregation, whether it's a Lutheran group or we're merged with another denomination, and we come not only with open hearts, but also an ability to problem solve. And most of our congregations that I'm aware of throughout the U.S. are in the same circumstance we're in. Declining membership, challenged resources, and trying to figure out how do we stay positive and affirmative as we go forward. And so it really calls on the very best of who we are individually. On the voting piece of it, there are a number of ways to do it, but again, legal resource would help us, and that would be the first question. Can we do online voting? Can we do live stream voting? Can we do paper voting and in a time frame that makes sense so that everyone can respond? Can we work it through Teams meetings, Zoom meeting, to involve everyone, that even if you're only with us part of the year, but you're still a member with the congregation, that you have a chance to do that. So, thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, Molly.
Just to answer your question, Just to answer your question, those are the questions we're still facing. We wanted to get this information to the congregation as quickly as possible so that there weren't rumors and innuendo and things going on. Council is meeting tomorrow to go over how the voting will work. That's one of the big questions ahead of us, is how can we provide the opportunity for as many people to vote as possible. And we want you to be able to. So you will hear more about that process over the coming days and weeks. But we are very aware that it's an issue and are working on it. And I want you to know that. Okay.
Another question I was asked, how far is Prince of Peace? 6 miles? 5 miles. Prince of Peace is 5 miles from here. Someone asked the question, well, what if I can't drive that far? We will not leave anybody in the parking lot. We will work this out whatever way we have to do it, whether we have a short bus or whatever we do. We're not leaving anyone behind because of distance, wherever we go, whether it's Prince of Peace or wherever it goes, unless we're going to the west side, then that'll be something else. But we're going to stay in the neighborhood, but no one will be left behind, so don't think I won't be able to drive there or something like that. That was a question I've been asked several times. So, anyone else? Yes.
I just want to add to what Mac said, that I don't think he covered the very last part of it, which is what the maintenance and shutdown costs are once we make the decision. And I've heard the term, it'll take about $100,000 to keep the building going until we make a sale and turn it over to someone else. So you got to keep that. That's why we can't keep using that trite phrase, kicking it down the road until it's too late. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else before we... This is the time, and if we can answer it, we're going to answer it. And as Molly said, we're meeting tomorrow, council's meeting tomorrow. So I know this is, maybe it's a shock to some of you, and maybe it isn't. Yes?
Will there be the two pastors, Pastor Rick?
I'm sorry, Mary.
I want to know what will happen to the pastor at Prince of Peace.
Well, the two pastors realize, you know, we're not trying to get rid of a pastor. We're not trying to get rid of Pastor Rick. You know Rick. I know Rick. These are all things we'll work out. No one's going to be thrown out. I mean, we're not saying we're here and you're going, or pastor. Our number one thing is that we keep our pastor, and obviously their number one thing would be to keep their pastor. So, I mean, but we're nowhere near that. We're not even dating yet. So, I mean, we can't ask how the marriage is going to work out, because we got to ask them to go out with us once at least. So I kind of think that's where we're at on this. We're not quite there. So, and we're going to, you know, after April 16th, you'll be telling us what you'd like to see us do. So please be here on the 16th, and we'll get your answer on the absentee voting also. Anyone else before you go to brunch? Kurt. Thank you. Yeah, and I thank this whole group that I had. I mean, we couldn't have handpicked, and we did not handpick. Everybody volunteered. And at first we said, wow, there's way too many people here. This isn't going to work. But how do we tell someone, no, they can't serve on that? We didn't ask anyone. We just said, you're welcome to join. We didn't go after anyone. So they were all people that gave from their heart and their time and their love. And it was a big, big challenge. And I applaud them very, very much. Okay, Pastor's trying to get rid of us. I think he wants to go to brunch. What? Oh, and we're around. If you don't feel comfortable in asking in the group, we'll be around a bit. So if you want to ask, Mary is the person to talk to. She'll answer every question. Mary will answer every question. But if you got a question to ask me, ask any of us. And I thank you all for being here. I know it's kind of a pain to stay beyond, but we just wanted this word out to you. We didn't want you to hear it from a neighbor or whatever. We wanted you to hear it from the horse's mouth. And I thank you all for giving this time. Thank you.
So a couple of things before the sending prayer. First of all, we don't know what the future option is going to be yet. So we're not making any assumptions about Prince of Peace or anything else as of this moment. The vote on the 16th is a vote to decide to move forward from here. And at that point in time, we'll be looking, the team and others will be looking into what options look to be the best. In initial conversations that I've had with Pastor Rick, we would both be very open to doing shared ministry. So we'll leave it at. I have no interest in being the senior pastor there. He can take care of that school and everything else. Let me work on the outreach part. I'd be happy. Secondly, thank you so much to all of you for staying. I mean, this is really important stuff. It's really important stuff. And I thank Jim for emphasizing the difference between the church and the building. because we can do a lot of good stuff as church wherever we are, whether it's here or it's another location. Thank you so much for your support for me. I do appreciate that. Alicia probably appreciates not having to move, at least not for a while. So let's share in a prayer together, shall we? Lord, we come before you in a very vulnerable space. The things that have been norm for so long are changing before our eyes. And we are being potentially exposed to another little window, like we saw in the message today, a perception that we hadn't considered before. And we ask, Lord, that you would open our hearts, our minds, our spirits to recognize the leading of the Spirit, that it might stretch us out of our comfort zones, but yet provide new opportunities and new life. We thank you for the faithful who have maintained the ministries of Ascension for so long. And we ask that they would stay committed and passionate to these ministries, even as we go through time of transition. All of this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. This is not going to happen overnight. Literally, upon a vote on April 16th, we're probably talking minimum of a year before everything would be transitioned over. So I don't want anybody thinking, okay, well, we make the vote in April and by July we're somewhere else. That's not the case. So if there were to be a merger, it's a very complicated process. Not impossible, but complicated. And that will take a long period of time. So, go in peace and serve the Lord.